quickly does it take to sell a home?
And if you buy in Frankston, the chances are you're going to do quite well. But then there are properties that are going to do better.
And when you correspond that with supply levels being constrained, then you have the hallmarks of that price growth that happens when demand is exceeding supply. That's just basic economics.
So when it does, you're like, wow, okay, there's 20 people wanting to buy this one house.
This gem could be Melbourne's #1 market over the next 5 years. Adi, I'm here to talk to you about
Frankston.
Frankston.
Let's talk about Frankston.
Let's go. Let's get straight into it.
Honestly, Frankston is such a funny one, man, because historically,
yes,
Frankston has one of the worst stigmas in all of Victoria, all of Melbourne. It was just terrible. Just people didn't like Frankston, right? But Frankston has completely evolved over the past couple of years, or last 10 years, really. And we're starting to see some really big demand from first home buyers, owner-occupiers, and now investors as well. So I would love to talk about Frankston. Frankston actually looks completely different from where it was 9 months ago.
Really?
Yeah, completely different. Yeah. It's moved.
Was that the day we released the Karam Downs podcast?
That was December. Yes. Yeah,
cool.
that did not help, I'm sure, with the demand. But honestly, we can now actually see it probably hasn't flowed through to the data level yet. But the same properties we were buying June, July last year for sort of the low 600s to mid 600s, they're quite literally going for 700s to 750s now. It's the exact same property as well.
Adi, guess what?
I love it.
Guess what I did?
What'd you do?
I flew to Melbourne.
Did you really?
And guess what I did after that?
You went to Frankston.
No, I went into a car.
Okay.
And then I got into that car,
Yep.
buckled my kids in, and we were going down to Mornington Peninsula.
Wow.
But then they fell asleep in the car. Everyone's getting this play-by-play. So sorry, audience, you're going to hear it. It's a story. It's the full schmozzle. You're getting it all. And then I stopped at Frankston and went to the beach and went for a quick little dip in the water while it was happening with one of my kids while the other one was sleeping. And I was there being like, damn, this is nice.
Yeah.
Where am I? Is this kind of like, just like, sorry, Frankstonites, you're not going to like this. Be like, is this kind of poor man Sydney? But like, it was good. It's a nice spot. It's a nice area to live. Yeah. Why would this area have bad stigma? It doesn't make any sense to me. Surely you'd want to live here if you're a Melbourneite. I don't understand.
Look, Frankston is quite a large LGA, right? So Frankston has Karam Downs in it, has Frankston North, has Frankston, has Seaford. Then there's Frankston South. That is probably the area that people associate when they sort of talk about Frankston in general. So Frankston South does have some...
Where's the beach?
We're talking about Frankston and sort of Seaford area, right? So there's the gorgeous pocket of like the LGA, and the price points at sort of these are sort of nearing the 800s as well. So we're talking about a premium side of Frankston, but Frankston in general, there are some fantastic pockets there where you can still pick up houses for that sub 750, which seems to be incredibly popular now in terms of the client base that we're seeing. And you're right, man. It is pretty. It is like it's an aesthetically pleasing suburb, which I think works for a lot of people because they want to have...
I mean, my experience there was the beach is pretty.
Yep.
A lot of it's pretty.
Yep.
I was there for the long weekend, though, so perhaps that's why it was a little bit quiet. But it does have a little bit of a gentrification story that's there going to it. But I come from Sydney's eastern suburbs now. I live there. I love going to the beaches all the time. It's amazing. Lifestyle is so good, especially post-COVID. So I moved to Maroubra just before the second lockdown in Sydney. And Maroubra happens to be one of those... it's literally a magical place where you just feel good. I often say that one part of the road, it feels like it only rains on one side of the road and not the other. Like there's some golf courses in the water and being like, no, that side you get rain, this side you don't. It just feels like magic. Beautiful. It's this beautiful part of Sydney. A lot of Sydney-siders feel the same and they're just like, hey, this is a really desirable place to live. When I think of Frankston, I think of like maybe an area like Maroubra or parts of the eastern suburbs before it became cool and before it became awesome. And it's kind of got that potential attached to it because it's not miles and miles away from being close to the action in Melbourne. It's accessible.
It is.
It's got a lot going for it.
It does.
And it's got a train station too as well.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Am I getting that right? Or do you think I'm just
No,
Like,
I think
am
you're
I
absolutely
overreading
right.
it as a Sydney sider that went and visited? Be like, oh, it's got a nice beach. Let's go by there. Is that? Or am I just sounding like a dork here?
No, I think there's definitely some merits there to what you're saying.
Yep.
But I'm the data guy, right? So I love looking at what's happening at the data level.
Yes. Take the emotion out for me, Adi.
Yeah, and I love that, it sort of appeals. Actually, I had a chat with a client today. He wanted something a little bit more upscale market versus some of the markets we had presented to him. We mentioned Frankston and we mentioned the beach, and suddenly, he was happy to pay another $100,000 to get into that market. It's an emotional element, but the great thing is the data story is also there to sort of underpin.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It has all the hallmarks. I mean, what I just said earlier, right? For a market to move from 600s to 700s in the span of like 6 to 9 months, that is a pretty significant movement.
Let's give the audience a quick rundown on that data framework. Tell me what's going on in Frankston.
So I like to look at it, if a client comes to me and says, hey, look, I'm sort of looking to extract equity in the next 2 to 3 years. I'm interested in Melbourne. It is kind of, Frankston is one of the first places that I think about because they're usually the budget's around 700, 750. And the drivers that I look for to underpin what that growth will look like in the next 2 years is supply and demand, right? So I look at what supply is doing in the market, what kind of building approvals it has, what kind of hold periods it has, which is hold periods is basically a reflection of how long someone holds the property in Frankston. It has like 11, 12 years. So people typically hold on to their properties well past a normal sort of market cycle. And I love that. On the demand side, what's happening is there has been a very market shift in the days on market that's happening in Frankston.
Really?
What was 60, 70 days, maybe 12 months ago, it's now fallen down to 50, 40, probably some of them are actually turning over within a couple of weeks. Right, so the demand is now happening at that ground level as well, and that framework where the supply is low and the demand starting to increase, you are talking about the hallmarks of a hotspot. And I would honestly, at this point, consider Frankston and the Frankston surrounds as hotspots. And
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. I love that on the ground intel. So unpacking something that Adi just said there, measuring demand for a property market is like, how do we do that? One way, there's a whole story group of data sets that you'd look at, but one way to look at it, especially for Melbourne markets, is how quickly does it take to sell a home? If you sell a home very, very quickly, then it suggests that more and more people are trying to buy it. Melbourne, another one is auction clearance rates. If auction clearance rates in a particular area are beginning to increase, then you can start feeling that area has more demand. And when you correspond that with supply levels being constrained, then you have the hallmarks of that price growth that happens when demand is exceeding supply. That's just basic economics. You touch on something really, really cool there as well. And my observation, I spent 10 days in Melbourne, looked at so many properties, drove around to so many of these suburbs, looked at where we're buying, looked at where I want to buy. I said it before, I think I said it on this podcast, is I want to buy in Melbourne. That's where I'm disclosing where I'm going to be buying my next investment property if I choose to buy. But I want to buy in Melbourne. It's just if I can make it happen, that's there. I was doing some of the on-the-ground legwork over this little period. And there was a lot of like really positive things to see. But one thing that I picked up is Melbourne does housing supply a little bit differently to Sydney. Mm-hmm. A lot of these suburbs, they actually have some infill development there. Like you can see people building some homes in and around sporadically between suburbs. You see these medium low-rise apartments spread across Melbourne kind of everywhere, and it does housing supply better than Sydney. All the measured data tells us this. When I went to Frankston, I didn't notice any tall cranes or anything like that going up. I didn't see too many housing supply type things, just at a visual sense. Yeah. Is that something you may have noticed as well?
Absolutely, man. And that's one of the reasons we buy in some of these pockets, right? Why am I talking about Frankston specifically, or why are we talking about Frankston specifically? Melbourne is a huge market. There are so many different pockets of Melbourne, right? So when someone sort of broad brushes Melbourne, that doesn't really give the actual picture because everyone's talking at an aggregate level.
100%.
But when you get down to the suburb level, yeah, Frankston really doesn't have development happening. There's not enough for the demand that there is. It's literally just turning over the existing stock. And a lot of that stock is just, being held for so long, it doesn't come up very often. So when it does, you're like, wow, okay, there's 20 people wanting to buy this one house. And suddenly, and the demand just increases and like the price points just increase. And most of the competition is actually coming from owner occupiers, right?
Yeah, I get that.
And owner occupiers, what are they? They're emotional buyers. So they will pay $10,000 more so they can get into the market, right? They're getting into their first home buyer scheme and all the schemes that are happening. And this is a market that is rampant for that. So it's I think what you just touched on, visually what you're seeing, that there is not a lot of development happening. Yeah, we can see that in the data as well. It's like building approval is like 0.3% or something. And that's basically nothing. That's not an actual number.
One person's building a duplex there.
Exactly, that's right, yeah. So it doesn't really actually mean anything. But
makes me a bit sad. You just said that 20 people are trying to buy there. And when I went to Frankston, guess what I did? I drove past and I'm like, that one. That's the one I want.
Yeah.
But you're telling me 19 other people have already done the same thing. Damn, man. Because I had put Frankston really high on my my own list of, and a few particular properties. There was this one, it was a commercial property actually. It was a commercial/retail property that's there on the corner right next to the beach, across the road from the car park. A bit run down, a bit dero, what's going on here? And I look at it, and I've been to Maribra for a long time, and it's been dero and horrible for a long time. And then it's just the best position, a beautiful corner sort of lot with frontages everywhere and walking to the beach and park and where all the foot traffic is. I'm like, that should be a tower. I look at that as being like, that should be a beautiful, beautiful shopping precinct or something like that. It makes sense. And Melbourne's got this huge population growth story that is going there over time. And Frankston is unique. This is what I like about it. It's unique.
It is.
Melbourne doesn't have many beachside pockets.
No, it doesn't, man. And that's what I love about it. But the other part that I like about Frankston is actually there are pockets in Frankston, because you got to be careful with Frankston, right? There are.
Yes.
It's a beautiful part. Again, we're talking about Frankston at an aggregate level, right?
Yes.
Frankston works, and if you buy in Frankston, the chances are you're going to do quite well. But then there are properties that are going to do better. Not every property is going to go up the exact same amount. There are properties that are going to do better. So I actually, before we jumped on this podcast, I actually contacted my local Melbourne specialist who works full time and buys only in Melbourne for our clients. I asked her to give me a couple of streets that we've been buying in, which really will see that uptick way more than some of the other pockets.
The owner-occupier streets.
That's right, James Street. Yeah, that's right. There's
The
James
one-
Street, Beach Street.
You're gonna tell people the suburb, the one that I pointed
that house there. Go by that house. And
All
you'll do
right,
well.
all right. I'll go find something else to point out. Okay, go.
But
give
you
it
have
away.
a team now, so that's different. So
Go, give it away. That's
Frank
fine.
Street, Bondi Avenue, Coogee Avenue. So some of these
Real
places,
names? They are real names.
Yeah.
Bondi Avenue,
Yeah.
Coogee Avenue. They've named it after the eastern suburbs of Sydney. I love it.
That's right. So when you we are picking up stock in some of the best pockets of Frankston. So if you can imagine, if you sort of think about the Frankston story, yes, Frankston's going to do well, but there are certain pockets that are going to do better because there are more owner-occupier appeal because there's an 80-20% owner-occupier ratio to renter ratio on that particular street. So it's not just, hey, let's just go buy in Frankston. You can, and likelihood you will do well. But really, where we're seeing the advantage is we're trying to pick up stock in some of the best parts of Frankston and Carrum Downs and some of the other pockets as well. So it's very exciting, man. I think it's probably the best suburb or area, I would say, in Melbourne where you can still pick up a house for under
tell me the budget.
750.
750.
750. I think 750
Minimum
gets
750?
you, yeah, absolutely. 750.
Is it minimum?
Yep, minimum would be 750. Look, if you want to get into like the high 600s, you're going to have to put some sweat equity into it. This is a
You're buying the
Darrow
crappy
house, you're buying the crappy house. If you're willing to put that in, I would highly encourage you. Yes, let's go in with a 680, 690 offer. We can still get away with those.
Yep.
It is getting harder though because
Tell me about the high school. What's going on there?
the Frankston High School, that zone, it is like a catchment area. I don't know what's the equivalent. Give me an equivalent.
Cherrybrook in Sydney. Is it that
Perfect.
good?
Absolutely. It's one of the top schools in Victoria.
Yes.
If you can buy in the Frankston High School zone, you are doing extremely well. But then you are paying probably $70,000 more than what you would pay, like literally just right.
It's a public
outside
school.
of it.
Assume it's
It
public
is, yeah.
school. Very
It is.
interesting. So I get that. For those that are listening, being like, who don't have young children or children, be like, why would I go pay $60,000, $70,000 more to live in a school zone? Being like, yeah, that's probably fair. If you don't have, you're never going to use it, doesn't make sense for you if you're going there as an owner occupier. As an investor, you might want to be catering to these sort of people who are going to be buying those homes because that's going to have greater owner occupier demand. I just moved like last year. One of the big reasons why I moved was to be part of a school pocket or closer to a certain group of schools that suited my family. Did I emotionally overpay for my property? Possibly as well. Like, I have bought many properties in my life, but this was my owner occupier. It was my home. I was going to go there. I imagined whether my kid's going to go ride a bicycle around and have fun there. I don't do that with my investment properties. Right. I don't care. Like, it's just numbers. This one wasn't just numbers to me, and I was very clear. I'm buying this property. That is what an owner occupier does. Yeah, man, I was the sucker. I'm the sucker. I'm the emotional owner.
But it makes sense though, right? Like, imagine you can pick up an investment property in that sort of pocket, the Frankston High School zone pocket. 10 years from now, people want to still send their kids to this high school.
For sure.
Of course, an owner occupier is going to come to you and be like, hey, I'll pay you $60,000 more just for the privilege of being able to send my kids to this school, which I've heard is one of the top schools in Victoria and has been for a long time. So,
did you go there?
I did not. I didn't go to school, Red.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Do you think all this thing I'm doing is a product of schoolwork? No, it's not. I went to...
I didn't.
Kawatha. Good old Kawatha in Noble Park, which...
Yeah. It's not miles away, right?
It's not miles away. No, it's probably 20 minutes, half an hour.
And for our audience watching, I also did spend some time in Dandenong because Adi did trash it in our last
That's
episode.
just not true.
And I'm like, Dandenong flag, I love this place. Come on, Dandenong.
Wait, weren't you telling me you were a little bit worried about your safety?
I was 100% worried by my safety there because I was like, Adi, am I even welcome here? And I realized when I went to Dandenong that it is probably the most diverse set of multicultural Australians that I've ever seen in an individual location. I absolutely loved it, honey. I loved it. I felt the energy. I felt the vibe. I felt the Sri Lankan food, followed by the Indonesian food, followed by the Brazilian food, and then the Colombian food, all inside a little grouping, and all walks of people and Australians just having a go, trying to make it happen. And I was like, I like Dandenong.
It is good.
I know you said it's the worst suburb.
Just not great for data. Great to visit.
Not great for data, but I enjoyed it.
Great to visit for a couple of hours,
Yeah. I didn't want to stay. So I thought it was cool, but I didn't want to stay. I wasn't going to buy a house there, but that was something to pick up. The one thing I wanted to talk about Frankston is we've talked a little bit about the alpha beta principles here.
Yes.
I'm looking at Frankston really high on my list. I'm actually looking at a higher budget price point because I look at it as a strategic place as well. A little bit like my Sydney lens, I look at Frankston as this is an area with a train station, with connectivity, with access to everything that you need to be at, and with lifestyle in a world that is changing rapidly, with Australia being increasingly strategically positioned as the best place in the world to live in. Yep. We live in when we talk about the Australian property market, I think of demand for Australian property as a global thing, especially in the year 2050 and 2100 as you go further and further forward. Australia is getting scarcer and scarcer in terms of how good it is. Yep. It is becoming the outlier in the world as the best place in the world to live in. I think that's part of the COVID change that's happened. People are working out, man, Frankston, in my opinion, could be one of Melbourne's best places to be over time. Yep. You said, historically, it's one of the worst. Mm-hmm. Over time, I could see it easily becoming like Brighton and Les Andes in Sydney. That's kind of what I see to it. It just needs a huge reinvestment in more things going into it. And that reinvestment happens around public transport, around infrastructure bases, and around lifestyle places. So that's why strategically, I was looking at it being like, can I find myself a nice strategic parcel of land that suits that? It gets me a decent enough yield because in the long term, you can get this alpha component where it's like the actual property can change over time at a higher budget price point. That's why I was in Frankston.
Yeah, as well. I think it makes sense. They're doing a massive hospital in the sort of through the lens of what you just said. Yep. They're doing a massive hospital expansion there. That's bringing in an influx of doctors and nurses into that mix. So a lot of the tenants that we speak to or the property managers that we speak to, it's a lot of doctors actually applying for leases because they're working in this sort of Frankston Hospital. It sort of services this massive area in the sort of southeastern suburb of Melbourne. I don't know, man. I mean, the idea that you can pick up something for $750K, like not that far from the beach.
What does it look like? What does a $750K investment look like?
Brick home, 3-bedroom, two bath, 550 to 600, which I think is quite solid. A lot of them are
so cheap.
Yeah, and a lot of them, it's quite interesting because a lot of them are positioned. We're talking about a 4% yield, 3.8 to 4% yield. Yeah, Yeah. But
Man,
if you know what
this
to
is
look
good.
for.
This is good. Everyone. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need... So, Adi, absolute whiz, Elia, we saw so many deals in these areas, for sure. But this is good. You don't need to be a genius to work this out. It's that whole Melbourne story. Go check out our 12+ episodes on Melbourne, unpacking different areas, unpacking different locations, unpacking why, unpacking the reasonings, the timings, the macro, the micro. We've talked about it here. Now we're talking about one of the best suburbs, and there's so many micro reasons here. When you strategically think about it over time, that makes a lot of sense for this entire area. We've touched on Carrum Downs, we've touched on Seaford, and now we're talking about Frankston itself, which is the hub point for this region.
Point, yeah,
is that
absolutely,
right?
yeah. And I think one of the most exciting things for me is that if yield is a bit of a challenge, we're actually having conversations with clients now where we're picking up sort of houses that are, sort of positioned quite strategically, where you can actually stand up a granny flat in the next couple of years.
Wow.
That adds, $400, $500 to your income all of a sudden off the back of like maybe a $200,000 construction. That's a conversation we're having a lot in Frankston as well. So again, if you sort of think about it strategically, you're putting in $750, maybe there's a little bit of work to be done to that. Maybe you add another $200K on a construction loan because you're building, a granny flat. Suddenly that yield goes from 4% to like close to 6%. Now you're talking about that it's a different ball game now. So suddenly you're talking about a 6%, like a regional market yield, but you're in a Melbourne metro market. So a lot of good things happening. If you can get into Frankston at that $750 price point, I say do it. It's very exciting.
For sure. Yeah. So let me quickly summarize here.
Sure.
You have an area... Oh, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Frankston has been strategically picked up by Melbourne as one of its activity centres that is going through that change. So there'll be a lot of upzoning of land. I do think Frankston will look very, very different when I go back again. If I don't go... I hadn't gone to Frankston in a long, long time, if ever, really, up until recently. I don't recall ever going there beforehand. So I expect it to look very, very different in 10 or 20 years, which is exactly the lens that I look for when I'm purchasing. And that is going to create a gentrification story because the Melbourne planning authorities have come up with a series of changes. They've also dropped the subdivision rules fairly recently from 600 to 550 for a subdivision there. But let's summarize all of the reasons why Frankston makes sense. So we've got the Melbourne macro story. Check out all the other podcasts, market cycle timing, good value, relative yield, beneficiary, if that makes sense. It's more affordable than other markets. Its relative yield is now the same as a lot of other capitals, where it was once the poorer yield performer, but now it's the same as Adelaide and Brisbane. So a lot of big reasons there. But Frankston itself, it is strategically located. It's got connectivity. It's got a hospital upgrade. It's got a lot of healthcare workers. It's got that Melbourne Planning Authority benefit there. It's got a decent yield. It's got a good price point. It's got unbelievable future lifestyle perspective. Some of the economic change and behavioral change that we are reading into the winds and we touched on here is increasingly Australia and Melbourne will be viewed as the lifestyle hub of the world, increasing demand for it over periods of time. And it's got really strong data with demand and supply, and the supply is contained. Literally, it's like a ding, 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 ding. That's kind of what I feel when I'm talking about this area.
It literally ticked every box. I mean, what box is there to tick after that? It's got the macro story, it's got the micro story.
Yeah. You found a way to get yield. You found a way to get yield as well. You
found a way to get yield as well, man. So there's really nothing. I'm trying to think of a reason why you wouldn't invest in a place like Frankston. Obviously, it is a higher price point, right? It is $750. So if you're in that price point, if you're still sort of a little bit averse to like the Melbourne story, because you've heard that Melbourne's not the best place, I want you to rethink, and I want you to think about places like Frankston because, they're completely squashing all this sort of negative sentiment that Melbourne has because it ticks literally every box. I mean, tell me a box that didn't tick.
You know what I think as well? As we touched on like the dominoes of that investor demand, we're early into Melbourne. I've picked this up from a few strategy phone calls where it's like, am I buying Melbourne too late? Melbourne's grown like 0.5% in the last freaking 12 months, if that. And that 0.5% is in the last month alone. It's grown 10% over 5 years while everyone is up at 70 or 80%. Melbourne's growth cycle has not started. It is not a hot market. It is significantly hotter than it was in certain pockets. Correct. But it's not a bustling hot market where there's no homes for sale and there's incredible demand. We've seen that in some markets. In other, it's increasingly hot, but there's ability to actually transact and buy a home.
Correct.
That you're early on into the journey piece. So you're strategically positioning yourself for change that is happening. And then there's that big macro change with that interest rate cutting cycle and the diverse economy that Melbourne has, benefiting from that and being insulated to some of the global risks that are in place at the moment. Adi, I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's a really clever one that we went through. For those watching, if I could ask a quick little favor, could you hit that subscribe button? That would be nice, because that's something that we apparently need for YouTube to keep pushing our content to more and more Australians looking to learn about property. But also, if you haven't checked out our series, we've unpacked the biggest economic shift of 2025, President Trump coming into the global economy and going, rah, 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 I'm going to do this and this, and its impact on the Australian property market city by city, and unpacked all of it. You can check all of that out on our YouTube channel if you wanted good insights into what is going on in the world and how it impacts Australian property.